Okay, so I guess I could call this a part two to the video I was making on Nick Blackwell. I just want to add a little bit of an update and also some of my thoughts um, in relation to that video. The latest development seems to be that he is in an induced coma, and I think today, later on today, doctors are going to try and get him out of that. It seems to be a positive development. Coma sounds very serious, and it is a serious situation, but the indications are certainly his family is sending out optimistic signs, and so are all our boxing friends. Billy Joe Saunders has said certain optimistic things. I guess everything will tell when Nick Blackwell comes out of this. I will say, if the worst that comes out of this is that his career is over, that is, he should see that as fortunate. He's had a pretty decent career, and he can hold his head high, but his career ending early is a far better outcome than him ending up in a wheelchair for the rest of his life or something worse. Um, it's too early to be complacent. I just really, really hope that he pulls out of this. Um, but a few thoughts on the wider issues. Inevitably, the debate has opened up about the safety of boxing and aspects to do with boxing. Um, a quick thing I want to say regarding the last video. Thank you for those who responded to it. In particular, Tom Sherlock. If you're watching this, you made a few comments, and I appreciate all the feedback, and to the others as well. You all raise valid points, and it's good to hear different respectful perspectives. And I do appreciate that aspect. Everyone was being quite respectful and mature in the way they were leaving comments, so I appreciate that. Um, there is a few things I want to talk about. A lot of the criticism from this seems to be falling on the referee. Now, Frank Warren has said he doesn't want to criticize the referee, although he's done it in the past, and others have said that as well. I'm reluctant to criticize the referee. I think they have a very, very difficult job. I didn't see the fight. Um, a consensus seems to be that a lot of people feel it should have been stopped earlier than it was, a few rounds early. The chairman of the British Boxing Board of Control, I forget the guy's name, Mr. Smith, I believe, said that everyone's entitled to the view, but he didn't agree with those medical practitioners and neurosurgeons who said they felt it should have been stopped 3 rounds early. He said, in his view, they done everything they could do professionally. The doctors, the cornermen, and the referee, in his view, got it right. Um, Apparently, Nick Blackwell himself was doing the thumbs up as he was leaving the stadium. A very important thing to point out is that the vast majority of fights don't end like this. So, to non boxing fans watching this situation, I would just point out the vast majority of fights do not end this way. There are other fights where there are precautions. For example, after the Joshua White fight, White had to be given oxygen, but that was very temporary. The majority of fights end with both guys hugging each other and doing thumbs up to the fans and a decision. Um, so it is important to put things in context because I don't think the one case should sort of overshadow the entire sport, but that doesn't mean that we should trivialize this case either. Um, and I think it would be very callous for people to just sort of say, "Oh, I hope he gets better," but let's forget him. That's I think people need to be careful about that. Um, one case is one case too many, and that people might say, "Well, it's a dangerous sport. You cannot avoid these things." I'm not so sure about that. I think there are certain things that can be done to improve safety. I wouldn't want a situation where boxing is no longer boxing, where guys are taken out if they have a little cut or something like that. But I think that certain things can be done. These are just some of my ideas, and I'm not saying I'm right. It's just some of the things I've been thinking about. Maybe there should be a situation where, well, actually, one thing I'd like to point out, and it's something that a lot of fans will not talk about, but it's the elephant in the room, so to speak. Boxing is a sport, perhaps more than any, driven by ego and notions of courage. Now, Any fighter that quits, or most fighters who quit, are shunned for that. In the sport of boxing, it's a very, very, very macho environment, a very macho culture. And a fighter that quits is generally dismissed as a quitter or even a card, which is a term I dislike anyway in the sport. But fighters who do this usually get criticized by fans and by critics. So if that culture is to prevail, then it's down to other people to save a fighter. Which other people is it? Three groups: doctors, the referee, and the corner people. Now, doctors, ringside doctors are not never going to be thanked for the fans by the fans. Um, the referee has possibly the toughest job in there, apart from the fighters themselves, because he is really the closest person to the action. Obviously, the corner men see the fighters between rounds, but the referee really is up close. And like I said in the last video, I still believe it is better for a referee to risk the criticism of ending a fight early than the consequences of that ending a fight late. Now, I don't think any referee should be vilified for doing their job, but if a referee ends a fight early, he'll be criticised in many situations, not all the time, but we saw a glaring example of that in Froch Groves 1. I made a passionate defence of the referee, and I stand by that 100% because I believe that he made a tough call. Now, we will never know. Had that fight continued, would George Groves be in the position that Nick Blackwell is in? I'm not saying the fights are exactly the same, but you have two young, courageous fighters. There is some similar traits. What is to say, had George Groves continued, he wouldn't have walked out and collapsed in his changing room from one shot too many, given that Carl Froch is a power puncher. There's no way to know. Now, maybe that wouldn't have happened, but like I say, it's very plausible, and I absolutely stand by Howard Foster making that decision. It's not as if he ended it early on. The fight had already went, I think it was 9 rounds. Um, the issue I have with this is that the sort of attitude, well, it's a dangerous sport, so anything goes. I don't really accept that. I sort of take the view, yes, it is a dangerous sport, but where there is feasible things that can be done to decrease the most serious risks, they should be taken without, without banning the sport or anything like that. Which, by the way, I do not advocate. I think in the last video, one or two people may have misunderstood me. I absolutely don't advocate banning boxing. I don't believe it should be banned. It's not like dogfighting or something where the participants have no say. I don't think it should be banned, and even if it was, it would make things worse because it would go underground, and then it would be controlled by outright gangsters. I mean, you might argue there's already gangsters in the sport, but at least this way, there is a controlled environment. Um, that may be one method. Having some sort of so like I said, there is ego involved. So if a fighter isn't going to save himself, or if he fears, if he's in trouble, it should take the cornermen to do that. And it's not an easy job. I'm not saying they've got an easy job, but if they notice their fighter is, for example, only seeing with one eye, I think that's sufficient enough to stop a fight. It doesn't matter if he is still showing courage and he's fighting back. If he has that sort of barrier, that is a serious, serious thing. And I do think there are certain mitigating circumstances where they need to not only be expected to do it, but actually obliged to do it in paperwork. I mean, that may be a controversial viewpoint, but you know, people might say, well, it's only one case, what's happened to Nick Blackwell, and then, like I said, the majority of fights this doesn't happen. But in the end of the day, this has to be a sport. It cannot be a situation that equates to modern day gladiatorial games. Because boxing is always going to be tough, and it is always going to be exceptional in that sense, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with blood and bruises. I'm fine with the physical toughness of the sport and many other aspects of it. I wouldn't be a fan if I wasn't fine with those things. But I don't accept that there is nothing that can be done. I don't accept that. Um, that's not good enough for Nick Blackwell. And it's nothing to do with toughness either, because you could be the toughest fighter in the world. All it takes is one shot that is, in a particular part of the head or whatever it is. I'm not a neurosurgeon, but the toughest fighter in the world still has that potential of getting bleeding on the brain. So this is a sport that will always carry risks. Now, I think that fans also need to play a role. They need to accept that. I find that fans can be quite fickle, and I'm not attacking any individuals here, by the way. I'm just making this observation. In situations like this, everyone is quick to denounce a referee. But let's say, for the sake of argument, this referee, I forget the guy's name, but let's say he had ended it 3 rounds early, as a lot of people are saying should have been the case. I am pretty sure there would have been fans, like Nick Blackwell fans, complaining about that. And okay, referees are tough guys. They're used to getting a lot of abuse, but fans need to play their role as well. And if fans want to see fighters basically constantly knock the other guy out, to the point where, yeah, I think real fans want to see a balanced fight. And yes, they want to see action, but I don't think any real fans want to see someone get seriously hurt. Um, I certainly don't. As a fan, what I want to see is an action packed, tough fight. But like I said in the previous video, I always feel uneasy about knockout fights, so maybe there should be less of a focus on this expectation that a great fight has to involve a knockout. You can have a great fight where there's no, and by knockout, I'm talking about the sort of knockout where a guy falls down. I'm not talking about a technical knockout, I'm talking about like a proper whacking knockout. Yes, it looks impressive from an aesthetic perspective, but my first thought is always concerned for that fighter. So maybe fans should, maybe there should be a culture in the sport where the expectation of a great fight is two guys that go at it, that put their heart and soul into a great fight, provide all the action, but they're both still standing at the end. There should be less of a, it shouldn't be something that is, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is, I don't think that that sort of spectacular knockout should be something that is seen as wonderful, because it's those sort of situations which are more likely to have a fighter in serious trouble. Look, ultimately I don't have all the answers here. I'm just speaking as a fan. I don't know the answers, but I don't agree that it should be a case of, oh well, we hope Nick Blackwell gets better, but we're not going to do anything. I think there probably can be things that should be done, and it doesn't matter if this is rare. Like I say, one case is one case too many. Um, and in the end of the day, boxers are not soldiers. This is a sport. It's not a war, and that cannot be overlooked.